Good day, everyone, and welcome. So, I had previously created a second age map depicting the routes and episode by episode where each of our companions, our adventurers, the characters within the Rings of Power TV series have visited, per episode. And so I want to go ahead and do a video going episode by episode showing where these individuals were during that period of time. Now, again, a lot of this is based off of conjecture and idea, based off of the dialogue, what geography that we know, what existed during the Second Age, any maps that we maybe got quick glimpses of. And so it might not be 100% accurate. It might not even be any way accurate, but it is at least a good depiction of kind of giving us an idea of what's happening and where people were during the episode. And I want to kind of be able to give kind of explanation as to why I chose those specific areas based off of the information that we know. So to begin off, in episode 1 of season 2, because this is only going to be focused on season 2, we show Sauron during the First Age being killed by orcs at what's called basically it's the Tower of Morgoth after Morgoth's destruction, as Sauron was trying to take over control and leadership of the orcs. He was being killed at a tower called Angband, and I should say Angband. And so, where is this location as depicted in season or in the Second Age? It doesn't exist. The reason being because this took place during the First Age, and what happened during the First Age is that it's an event called the Sundering, in which it caused a large piece of Middle Earth off its west coast to become submerged. It was an area called Barrowland, and north of Barrowland, and in this image here, it took place. The Angband was up in Fordwaith, but Fordwaith, as you can see in its west side, is gone. It's basically half of Middle Earth, or even a third of Middle Earth, was kind of sunk beneath the ocean. And so off this left side, almost off the map of where you see the ocean on the top left, is a continued expanse of ice. And up there, in the desolate north, was Angband. And this is presumably a different location of a tower location that you see in episode 1, season 1 of Rings of Power. So this supposedly, if this was the location of Angband, it had to have taken place prior to the Sundering. And so as you see him reforming himself, presumably over thousands of years, depending on how long it was from when it happened to when we see him in the in the Second Age, in episode 1 of season 1, he makes his way onto the land, and at some point something happens, and where Angband is no longer there, and so he finds his way, makes his way back towards the east, and presumably somewhere where it's snowy, where he encounters a human on some sort of wagon trail, maybe somewhere in the desolate north where there's the North tribes, where he encounters someone there and takes his form as Hellbrand. And then he makes his way south, and the route is unknown. And that is a pure guess, because it really depends on where he enters in the mainland Middle-earth. But what we do know is if you go from where we see where is Eriador, which is where eventually in this area right here is where the Shire will eventually become what it is, right here. So eventually, presumably, he makes his way south. And these lines right here don't indicate his path, or potentially could indicate his path, because during that period, that is where he would encounter, most likely, probably closer to where the Southlands would be, is where he encounters that the bandwagon of people escaping the carnage of Adar and his orcs, and this is before the volcano Mount Doom erupts. So this is pre the formation of Mordor. So probably somewhere in this area, along this area, he encounters, because we can see, the rampaging, the effects of the smokes and all that in the distance. And it could technically even be having been in where the Southlands were, because they're indicating that where Mordor is where the Southlands are, because we see right here Tir Harad. That is the town that we see originally Theo and his mom lives in. So somewhere in between here is where we see him in that bandwagon. And that bandwagon convinces him to go ahead and takes a boat west, which we don't know exactly where he left port at. Most likely an existing port. And during that time, it's not really known which locations were active ports. We do know that Pelagier, it's an old colony town from Numenor, and during this time, it actually had some people there, but it doesn't have anyone there until later on when all the battles happen. But at some point, they take a boat, they head west, in which they encounter the beast. The ship crashes, and that is where we see him meet up with Galadriel. At that point, it phases to where he was after the ending of episode 8 of season 1, where he is basically, he gave himself up to be captured by Adar's orcs, to be taken back to now what is now Mordor. It's now, you have the volcano's gone up, everything's dark and smoky and dying, and is taken to where Adar had his encampment. Now, as to where that encampment was, the only locations we really necessarily know there was it was indicated that in the plateau of Gorgoroth is where Tir Harad was. That's the town that we originally met Theo and his mom. Now, if we see on the depictions on the film, the location in which we see the volcano, when we see shots of Adar's encampment, it shows it to the north with a mountain range in its background nearby. So that is why I had placed it south of Mount Doom and shown as an encampment, and it's also near enough to Tir Harad. And so we see him in season 2, episode 1, having taken, given himself up at the encampment there. Now, and then we have his interactions with Adar. And then it cuts to the chase, where Galadriel is chasing Elrond to try to get captured, try to get a hold of those rings. And that is where we show, most likely they're probably running through like this area here on the way to the Grey Havens. the Grey Havens is the capital of Linden, which is where Gil-galad rules as the High King of the Elves. And so you can see, obviously, it's up here in Eriador. This is also the location of the Grey Havens, if you remember from Fellowship of the Ring, or from Lord of the Rings, in which the elves and the hobbits and Gandalf leave for Valinor. So they actually leave out of Grey Havens, what is left of Grey Havens. And so this is where we have the whole confrontation with Elrond and Galadriel in episode 4. Well, technically it's actually episode episode 1 through 5, and Galadriel is episode 1 through 4. So she was there in episode 1, and Gil-galad and Elrond, and then when Elrond jumps off of the waterfall, presumably probably the waterfall of this river right here, he makes his way to Círdan's little workshop where he is building the ships, and that's where we encounter him with Círdan. And so we have our interactions there with season 1 and season 2. Now, or episode 1 and episode 2. Now, at the same time, just like we were talking about, we have Sauron, in over here in Mordor in episode 1. We then see the shots that are taking place at Eregion. Eregion is over here. This is actually, for those of you kind of know the geography of the Third Age, you have the Shire right here. And then this four-way, as you're following things across, this right here is what becomes the Brandywine Bridge. And then this cross section right here is where Breland is formed, and Bree is right here. And if you keep in the east-west, or the Great Road east into, wow, I can't remember what this land is here. This is where Weathertop and Sewell would eventually become a watchtower, and then this takes you into the Trollshaws over to what will become Rivendell. But south of there, you come down here where Eregion is, which is where Celebrimbor has his forge, and he rules the elves that are here. And so this is where we pick up with Sauron as he arrives towards the end of episode 1 to try to get entrance here. We got episode 1, so he remains there between episode 1 through episode 6. And then that gets us back to episodes 3 and 4, where Galadriel is trying to warn about Sauron. Elrond is trying to have her get rid of the rings, and she's trying to convince Gil-galad to allow her to lead a group back to Eregion to try to find out what's going on there. And so eventually, finally, by episode 4, I'll make sure I'm not skipping anything here. Episode 4, they convince Gilgalad to allow that to happen, to have the party ran by Elrond. Now, let's want to double check here. Now, in the same thing in episode 3, this is where we are in Khazad-dûm. Khazad-dûm's actually not that, relatively not far from Eregion. So, but this is where we have Duran trying to convince his father not to use the ring. That's also during the time, this is inside of Moria, where you have the light tunnels collapsing and them trying to figure out what's going on, and this is also where we see what where all the tragedy of Khazad-dûm's happening, with them losing their light, and so all that's happening typically between episodes 3 and 6 itself. But as we jump back to the Grey Havens, where Galadriel finally convinces Gilgalad to have Elrond come with them, they actually set west or set east to try to get there. Now, the reason why I chose these paths is that these are established roads during that time in which we know that a lot of them travel. Now, it's not a guarantee that they follow these paths, but it's potential. And this is actually similar paths that you would take if you're going to go through the Shire. Because remember, the Shire's right here, so this is actually would be the main road going through what would become the Shire. And so, now, the next thing we know as they're traveling eastward is that they're going through a forest, and they're confronting what appears to be a broken bridge with a ravine. And I mean, knowing in the Third Age, now that takes us through the Shire. When we're talking about where to go and to try to get to Eregion, they're either saying going north, which is going to take 2 weeks. Most likely, they're talking about heading back across the Brandywine Bridge, heading north, going around Lake Evendim, and then coming back south, if they can't cross any of this water. So most likely, this bridge, Brandywine Bridge, existed, and then there's the other bridge that's continuing east that you encounter just before getting to what would become Bree. And the reason why I'm choosing that is the bridge most likely that was broken is because when they indicate where to go to what their alternate routes were to go north, and they'll take 2 weeks to add on to their stuff, which means them coming up and going around Lake Evendim and coming back south, or going south through the Barrow Downs. And that would mean them coming back out and coming south through the Old Forest. The forest that you guys see them in is the Old Forest. And then through the Old Forest, and then they make their way into the Barrow Downs right here. And they have their confrontation there with the Barrow Rights. And from that point on, we only ever see them in a forested area. The Barrow Downs most likely because the Barrow Downs are a wide open hilly area, and so in the show it depicts it having more of a forest. So that's hard because there wasn't really a forest there. We never knew there to be a forest there. But for the remainder of the period of all the way up to episode 6, they're technically in the forest. So this area out here is a plains area, and even back in the Second Age, there could be a forest here. It could be like how you have this, because this right here is the Old Forest. Old Forest could have been bigger by that during the Second Age, because we know that a lot of the forests were lost during that period. And so either they could have been all these forests here, but most likely their alternate is once they've gone through the Barrow Downs, this is the Barrow Downs here, that they would continue west or continue east to the most fortunate area that they can go through what becomes the South Downs, And by episode 4, this is where they encounter the tracks and the trail of what appears to be Adar's group of him and the orcs that actually, during that whole period, see the black line right there, black dots? Um, Most likely since episode 1. 'Cause that's the last time we see him. He's making his way with his army all the way through across the gap of what would become the Gap of Rohan, because this is Rohan here. Becomes what becomes the Gap of Rohan, all the way north, and in the forest, and Elrond and Galadriel encounter them there, and so by the end of episode 4, you have Elrond that was there. They find out about the army that's approaching Eregion from the south, because logically, using geography, they're coming from the south, so it's most likely through here versus trying to come through Khazad-dûm. And that is when she gives Elrond her ring to head back to the Grey Havens to warn them about what's happening. So by the end of episode 4, she sends him back, but he's still technically at the spot. But it's also about the time in which she gets captured by Adar. So by the end of episode 4, she's at his camp. And then she's at his camp all the way through to the end of episode 5. And then by the end of episode 6, they've moved closer, their encampment and all that, towards Eregion, because that is the part where we see them overlooking, presumably, a cliff down looking into the city of Eregion. Now, we also have Sauron in episode 6, is when he had gone and visited Khazad-dûm, asking for more Mithril. Now, I'm trying to think here, any aspect we are missing. Oh, and so, now, back to the Númenóreans. Obviously, Númenor is way off screen to the left here. It's way over here towards the east. So that's where everything that's happening on Númenor is happening. But what about Isildur and Arondir? So when we see Elendil with his horse, and trying to get him onto the horse, we know that is Pelargir later on. And at Pelargir, which is currently inhabited right now, that's where they have their ships. That's where the horse itself he lets go, and we see it running off. And this is where he sets sail back to Númenor. Now, the reason why I was able to track is because the next scene we actually see the scene itself looks like it's like the map. It shows a map on screen where it shows it following north, and it shows it coming into this spot right here. So this spot right here, this is actually the same little citadel, the same little tower that the Southlanders, remember in season 1 where it had the big tower where you used that little sword spot where it triggered the eruption of Mount Doom? Well, this is the same, this is the location of that tower. And so then it continues seeing the horse running through the interaction, going through the towns, going through the orcs, because presumably he's taking the same route. Apparently he's trying to find Isildur. And so that takes you into what is the Black Forest. And literally in this mountain range, the Eiffel Duquette mountain range right here is the Black Forest. You can, the map doesn't show it very well, but I have like little forest trees right here. So in there is where the horse actually finds Isildur. That is where he's captured in the webs. And so once he breaks free, I think that's on season episode 3. He breaks free. Uh, they are wandering on the horse through burnt trees. The forest itself is burnt, presumably probably wandering west or wandering through the forest, and that's where he finally meets. I can't remember her name. The girl that kind of that joins him. She shows him a map. The map itself, actually, if you actually freeze frame, it shows a map, a route through the hills. That's probably the same hills that the horse went through. That takes you this way, and they mention on the map Pelagier, and most likely that so that's most likely where his dad took all the people, and probably also took her people. You see the dotted lines of it coming across the mountain range. She mentions about are you heading towards the range, which is most likely this range right here. There's a path that takes you through the range, and it shows the map heading south. So presumably he's heading south, and then this is presumably where he encounters the wagons down here, because he can see in the distance Pelagier. This is where he encounters the wagon with the old man that ends up being a trick, and the wild men try to attack, and that is where Arondir comes into place. And so they have a little battle there, and all three of them, that's when he says, "I have my own business to attend to," because he also is heading towards Pelagier. And as they're heading there, you can see that there's a water between them and the town. That this is where they're looking across, and that's where he mentions that doesn't appear to be ships in the harbor, and because it's basically this area right here. So they have the funeral for I think Broadway, I can't remember her name, and Pelagier. And then I guess at one point the horse had gone missing. I guess it had gone missing with the bandits. And so this is where Theo had mentions to Isildur about wanting to get back his horse. And so, and then that's by beginning of episode 4. That is where we see them heading north into a forest. Now, on all the maps I've shown of the Third Age, there's no forest here. But either they've added it for the show, or it's changed since the Second Age. But presumably they're heading north to try to find where the horse is. So this would be the horse, or this would be the area. Because Theo, I guess Theo goes missing. They find Theo here. They have the whole thing with the little worm thing in the sand. They free Theo from the Ints, and the Int and his Int wife, and and then they later on get his horse here, and so that ends in through with episode of 4. I believe is the last time we see Isildur, Arondir, and Theo, and that is where we pick up on the other locations for episodes 5 and 6. And so this kind of gives us and so now the reason why I was trying to keep them separate, because it's really complicated. This is the three different groups of people that are happening here. But we have one more group of people that things have been happening, and that is the Stranger and the Harfoots. Now, based off of the map website, they created a map. It's pretty much the same kind of idea that I did here for second season, but did for the first season. I think it's ring ROP-map.com. They created a map of where the Harfoots traveled during season 1. And from what it showed here, because this is the Mirkwood, this is Mirkwood. Down here is all what would become Gondor. All this here is what would become the Rohan. And to the east of there, still what is considered Rovanian, the land of Rovanian. This area presumably is where the Harfoots were going around in a circle. And that's probably what happened is they got lost. They're going around in a circle. They never made their way this way. I think actually part of their travels put them in up to Fangorn Forest. So a lot of their routes had them in this big open, what becomes Rohan, and all this here. And so by the end of the first season, the group shows them probably on the edge of what is Mirkwood. But then by episode 1, they have traveled. And they are in a desolate place. And that presumably puts them in an area where there's no access to water. That presumably puts them in either the east side of where they were before, or into the lands of Rhûn. The Rhûn is this is Sea of Rhûn, and so presumably right here is where in season 1, episode 1 is where we encounter Nori, and then eventually Poppy pops up, and then the Stranger, and then that is where they start wandering through the desert. They're suffering from thirst, dehydration, and eventually, again, this is all conjecture because we have no idea. They eventually encounter the well. It's hard to see that, but that's a well right there. This is where they have the encounter with the members of the Dark Wizards group. And where we later on learn to be out of Gair, or Chaos Gair. As to where this position is, or where this is, we don't know. We know that this fortress is in the Sea of Rhûn, or the Rhûn, but we don't know where, because everything west or east of the sea is Rhûn. All this is Rhûn. But it's also going to be nearby enough to where they have their people going back and forth. So this is just conjecture until we find out more. Now, but what we do know is at the end of episode 2, we know when the Stranger creates that tornado, that dust devil, sends them off doing to other places. Since Nori and Poppy, and he can't find them. Now, presumably, they headed south, or they headed more east. Again, don't know the directions, because we really don't know anything yet. But we do hear, at least from when one of the scouts returned back to Karis Garir to talk to the Dark Wizard, they mention that the other Istar, mentioning the Stranger, has gone north to the Hermits. So that's why I have him going north. So if this is the relative area, that puts him kind of up here. And why it actually fits in, because we know by episode 6, there is that whole field of stumps of trees, is that in some of the depictions of Rhûn, that there is a long forest right here. That probably, maybe at some point, that forest existed. And that was probably the forest that Old Man Ironwood, if he had originally been an Ent, would have kind of helped take care of. But all that's left are the stumps. So this could be where all those stumps are depicting that forest that was right here, where he encounters Tom Bombadil in episode 4. But then, again, we don't know the direction in which Nori and Poppy wander. It's either east or south, and this is where, at some point in episode 4, they encounter, I can't remember his name, on the store, in which they make their way to the store's village. Again, the position's just conjecture; we don't know yet. So as of end of episode 6, we have the Harfoots at the store village. We have the stranger at Tom Bombadil's on that old forest that he's considering whether or not to do find a staff or try to find and help Nori and Poppy. So that is where we leave. Again, this kind of gives us more an idea of relatively where they are on the map. Where they exactly are, we don't know yet. But hopefully soon we'll be able to find out. And so that goes for the same of everything else. But I do hope this kind of gives you guys an idea, those of you who are not aware of where things were or where things may have been during the first or the second age. Hope this kind of helps with a little bit of enlightenment, kind of gives you an idea of where people were and where people are now. So as of episode 6, we have Galadriel and Adar outside of Eregion getting ready to, apparently Adar is getting ready to fight. At the end of episode 6, Sauron is in Khazad-dûm. Most likely, he's heading back to Eregion. Since we didn't see him at the end of 6. We also show episode 6 is when Duron had gone there to ask about the rings. So it began with Duron there, and then at the end of episode 6 is when Sauron had gone to Khazad-dûm. And then we have Elrond at the end of, well, actually, as of episode 5, he was in the Grey Havens. Presumably episode 6 or episode 7. I guess we never saw him in episode 7 or 6. He is already back in. He's still in the Grey Havens. So it's kind of where we left it off for episode 7. I will do a complete relay of this as once we finish with this season, and hopefully by that time we have more idea of where they are in Rune and how things are kind of laying out. Want to thank you all for joining me. Hope this was at least some entertaining, enlightening, and kind of gives you an idea of where things are. You have an excellent day. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to our YouTube channel here, and have a great day.